Watch it.
So last year we saw Hao-Yu Lee become a one-man show and carry Erie on its back the first half of the season, as his offensive numbers were very similar to Colt Keith's, except for just a little less power. But then he had a back injury and missed the rest of the season. And so then, we saw him starting to hit the ball really well at the beginning of spring training. And then, he's gone off to a kind of a slow start as far as power numbers go. But the reason why I wanted to bring him up is because, like, the pump it or punch it or pump the brakes are kind of like, we're still playing around the names of this, if you will. But the reason why I wanted to bring him up was kind of do a check-in on where he is at, Chris. I mean, a lot of people really like Hao-Yu Lee. We've been talking about him quite a bit. He's among our top 10 prospects. And the Tigers just got Gage Workman back, who can play short and third. And Lee's been playing second and third. But now you have Young there, so it's kind of a logjam of sorts. But let's start from last year. This is from 2024, but we'll the reason why I wanted to play this is to kind of see, as we look at like what he does to get, he looks for pitches. He's a good, anything that goes on the outside of play, he'll go looking for. But the second part of this audio here is what I wanted to really play before we just go into further discussion. And this is what Scott Harris said about what Lee was working on.
As you watch Hao-Yu Lee at bats, where do your eyes go?
One thing we've been working on with him is his stride direction, staying a little bit more closed at the plate, making sure that he can stay on the sliders down and away. He has tremendous power to all fields, and he has tremendous bat-to-ball skills. And allowing him to drive the ball to right center field will open up his game in the big leagues.
All right. So that being said, Chris, here's some of his at-bats as we go through this a little bit. But I don't know. He just looks a little like off here. This is early on. This is kind of goes from April onward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we had Lee ranked higher than anybody else, right? So we have to own that in some capacity. I think we had him fourth in our top 46. And we thought it was because he did. We thought he was above average hitter with above average power, and we thought he can run a little bit, and we thought he was a solid defender, definitely at second base, and we thought maybe he could play base. And it's just been a really slow start in Toledo, and it was really kind of we wrote our own to-do list for every top prospect, and Hao-Yu Lee got a fair amount of time in spring training, which led us to say, okay, this is what we think he needs to do. And so our to-do list for him was to show a little more patience and stop missing fastballs, because that was the tough thing that seemed to be happening in spring training, is he just kept swinging and missing at fastballs. And just the further details here, we said, but as spring training wore on, he started swinging and missing at an alarming rate, particularly against the elevated fastballs. That didn't seem to be a problem for him in 2024. I don't remember thinking that. And we think he just got a little too aggressive in camp in the hopes of earning a Major League Baseball job. We'd like to see him cut down on his swing a bit and get back to what worked for him last year. And the early results this year, not great, right? He was swinging and missing an awful lot, but in the month of May, he has looked a lot more like the player he was last year, at least from the numbers, the surface numbers. And that was the funny play there where the pitcher fell. But yeah, I mean they went to Scranton Wilkes-Barre, right? And you see that's kind of what Scott Harris wanted him to do, right? Drive the ball with that wasn't a missile or anything like that, but he hit a line drive to right center.
And that's nice to see. That's approach right there. There's another good example of that, like, just kind of, it looks like he's staying back a little bit more in the zone. Doesn't look like he's swinging out of his shoe tops. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at some of the
defensive plays here.
Yeah, some of the plays for the AAA team for the Yankees. But it's not like the thing is with Toledo this year. One of the things that I wanted to mention about the Mud Hens is that the Mud Hens have really been a team that has been really kind of, it's a hodgepodge of, they're a game under 500 heading into, as of time of recording, heading into today's game, May 17th. And so we always look at individual prospects, but it as far as like team play goes, we do look at that because take that in consideration. But Lee, the offense for Toledo, it's not been where we've seen like an Erie or West Michigan or anything like that, where you're seeing It's about what, but this week though, I mean, this is where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in the last 4 games, they've outscored Scranton 28-12. But I think it has a lot to do with Lee. I think one of my observations is I don't think he's trying to get for. I mean, he's talked about this before. When through his interpreter last year, he's kind of always looking for the long ball. But in this case, I think he's settling in to have more of a line drive approach at the plate, Chris. I mean, that's the way I look at it. And I interpret it as him just staying back a little bit and maybe kind of taking the Torkelson route where just looking for getting on base no matter what. He almost hit for the cycle. Was it Thursday?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And he had three chances to get the home run, and he got a single, and I think pop out to strike out. But no, I think that's possible. It'll be interesting to talk to him again to see if he's changed anything. But it did kind of feel like he was just up there trying to hit home runs in every at bat. And that's not a great way to hit home runs unless you're, an elite hitter. And so he probably, ideally would have kind of toned down the approach a little bit and is just making more contact and letting the natural strength line drives and balls to the gaps. And like you said, we can look at his stats here in May. So through how many games is this? 15 games or so, a dozen games. Let me standard 13 games. So in 13 games, he's hitting 309 with a 145 ISO, which is good for, and let's see, a 11.3% walk rate, a 19.4% strikeout rate. That's kind of what we saw last year, right? Like it's a double-digit walk rate with a strikeout rate under 20%, that'll play. So it's a 132 WRC plus. The power hasn't been there per se, at least the home run power. He's had 3 doubles, a triple, and a homer in the last in this month. So the numbers are starting to get there, at least the surface numbers, and that's what we like to see. But we do have Statcast data for AAA now, which we did not have, at least publicly available in AA, to see what's going on underneath those numbers, and that's still a little worrisome to me. Yeah. So we can look at you can break it down by pitch and whiff rate, good stuff. And so for the season, he's hitting 186 with a 27% whiff rate against 4-seam fastballs. Now the expected batting average is 226, and his slugging of 302 is below his expected slugging of 401. I don't know how much to take into account, expected batting average and slugging in the minors, but other than that, he's hitting fairly well against sliders. He's crushing sinkers. He's hitting well against cutters. Curveballs haven't been a huge issue. He's hitting 230. It's not great. Sweepers, not 091, but it's kind of limited sample size there. And then the changeups, he's hitting 278. So that was a lot of good performance on all the pitch shapes for most of the year, except for the fastball. And so then I looked at the last 2 weeks, basically, or this month. How's he doing in May? Because the surface level stats are there, right? And still not great on the fastball. 133 in May against fastballs with a 30% whiff rate.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. It's something to consider. Is that it's kind of the same problem that Ace Young was having, right, with fastballs?
Yeah, absolutely. And you wonder if there's something to the swing that just makes it so he can't hit the velocity. I will say, and again, the expected stats here, his expected batting average is 221, so that's better than 133, but still not great. And his expected slugging is 534, as opposed to an actual slugging of 200. So he's hitting the ball hard and apparently not finding, good luck. But the rest of his numbers in May are crazy. He's hitting 571 against the sinkers, 500 against sliders, 400 against cutters, 250 against curveballs, and still struggling with the sweeper, 167, but 300 against changeups. So he's basically crushing everything but fastballs. And it's great that he can do that against the secondary pitches. And maybe that's how he needs to get to where he needs to be, is to start doing damage on those secondary offerings. And maybe he just needs to lay off the fastball. And that's something I haven't dug into. Maybe they're continuing to throw him elevated fastballs and he's not swinging anymore. But if you can't hit average major league velocity in the zone, it's going to be real hard to have any kind of success in the big leagues. So I don't know. Again, we're 6 weeks into the season, 7 weeks into the minor league season, and things are starting to perk up for him the last couple of weeks. That's great to see. There's just a little bit more to be done. So again, if we were talking about pump it or punch it here, I'm saying pump it. Pump the brakes on Hao-Yu Lee until we see more contact against fastballs.
Yeah, and if you're talking about what the to-do list here, I mean, that's exactly what you're just saying, the hitting better against fastballs, which is the thing about fastballs at the big league level. It's not just velocity. It's also the movement of that. We've talked about, a guy can throw 93, 94, but if he's throwing a secondary pitch, like for example, of I think of Tommy Canley as example, his changeup, the way he throws his changeup sets up his fastball, because then it looks the shape, same thing. So you have a lot more deception on even 93, 94, comparatively speaking, to what you would see in AAA or AA for that matter. And so I think that if there's one thing that we were talking about, that we've talked about this in a couple of videos now, the philosophy of Detroit having this as a ground for the prospects is starting to make a lot more sense, which is why you don't see these guys just jump from AA to AAA, because there is definitely a finishing school aspect to it. I don't think finishing schools are around anymore, but there is a polish where they have to really just kind of master it a little bit. And like you look at Justin Henry Molloy, for example, he started hitting velocity better towards his end of his term at Toledo. Whether he comes back or not down there with the roster crunch coming up will be interesting to see. But I think Lee defensively, I've talked to Colin about this too. Colin, who's been down a couple of Toledo games this year, thinks he's better at second base versus third base, where he has hard time with the throw. And that's the last thing we'll discuss here. What's his long-term position? That's it, and that's another question too that I would like to see here in the next few months. Is now you have Gage Workman back, you have Young there, you have Agato at short, but I think there's gonna be some sort of roster crunch at Toledo too at some point too, because you also have to think about considering you have Trey Cruz down in AA. There has to be some sort of upward movement at some point. But Young, I think, might be better at second base. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen Young perform better at third base in a way that is shocking to me. I think I have like zero worries about Hao-Yu Lee at second base at all. Yeah. I think he's good there. He's got the arm. He's got good range. I think he could be at least average, if not an above average defender there. At least, in worst case scenario, he's like, Gleyber Torres, acceptable second base, right? Like he's somewhere between there and above average to give you a great scouting view. Third base is a much bigger question mark. I think he has all the physical abilities to do that, but we've seen him be a little bit error prone, and his throws can miss the mark. And that's one thing we can say about Jace Young is that most of his throws were on line this year. And that always feels like something that you can improve, but it must be harder than it looks from the outside, right? Because we've seen other players who just could never do that. Winsel Perez could never throw from the left side of the infield or the right side eventually. And Willie Castro really struggled with that in his time. Now he eventually, got good enough to handle that. So I don't know. I mean, I think the Tigers just kind of have a boatload of second basemen these days. Max Anderson is nudging his way into that conversation now too. And you got Torres, you got Keith, you got everybody. McGonigal coming up. He may play second base. So, I think it makes sense for them to try Lee at third base as much as possible. But ultimately, I do think that second base is probably his best position. And traditionally he fits the offensive mold of a second baseman better too, right? Like I think it's not going to be like 30 home run power or anything like that, but he could, in its prime, if he starts hitting those fastballs, could be a 15, 20, 25 home run guy maybe. So I don't know. It's also helpful to remember his age and his relative lack of experience, right? He's 22.
Yeah,
and
pretty young for AAA too.
And beyond that, he has not played, I think, more than 100 games in any season. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not. You're not wrong about that whatsoever. Actually, let me. I got his. I got his numbers right here. So let me
So 79 in 2022, 75 in 2023.
Yeah,
87 last year. Yeah, so he's the injuries are another question mark there, but So I think he's just a guy that, give him more time. If he has to spend the full year in AAA Toledo, that's totally fine. The Tigers don't necessarily need a second baseman right now. It would have been awesome if he could have just come out and mashed and hit 400 and look like the third baseman of the future. But, maybe it's more time. So,
yeah, last year, by the way, was the most games he's played was 87. So last year before he got injured, ironically. And so there you go. You're right. There's no harm for him being at Toledo this way, especially Tigers right now contending for a playoff spot. They have the best record in baseball right now. And so the luxury of this currently with some of these prospects, there's no pump it. It's kind of funny how we're doing these kind of segments, but it's also, it could be to the next level. So if, for example, if the Max Clark one would be funny to me, because it's like, okay, well, does he go to Double-A right now? There's some roadblocks there, not because of his ability, but at any rate. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for checking us out. And of course, if you're on our Patreon, you got this before anybody else did. And check out all our videos over on our YouTube channel. Subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. Literally, we have over 700 videos of minor league content going back to Taro Scooble's days at Double-A. Our first interview was ever with Riley Green back in 2019 when he was a younger, smaller young man. And see the evolution of some of these players. You can find it on our channel, Tiger Minor League Report. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.